Hey, what is up, guys? I hope you're doing great. Today I'm recording this video about the topic why learn Ruby is a programming language for beginners. Because I think Ruby is the easiest way to learn programming, and so we're gonna talk about that. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you do so, please give it a like. If you have any questions, post them down in the comments. And yeah, let's get started. So we're gonna cover these topics briefly, and then I'm planning on doing more videos on each of these topics in depth. And again, if there's one that you really want to know more about, let me know in the comments. So why I think Ruby is a great first programming language. First, I'm gonna talk about why I chose Ruby myself 10 years ago, the simplicity and readability of the language, why it's interactive and fun, why it has a strong community, and its use cases that are many, and the focus on best practices that comes with Ruby and Ruby on Rails, and lastly, how to transition to other languages from Ruby. So why I chose Ruby myself 10 years ago. So this is a funny picture of me 10 years ago. And I was not a programmer yet 10 years ago when I was 20, 23, 24. I actually started programming pretty late. And the reason why is because going out of high school, my plan was absolutely not to become a programmer. My plan was not very clear, but I knew that I wanted to do something in entrepreneurship. So what I did is basically I went to a business school, but that business school didn't work out really well. It was not really for me. I started learning marketing in that business school. That was the first skill I learned, like really, and the first working skill I was really interested in. But then I switched to a more web-driven or web-focused school. It was not like entirely a programming school, but we did some programming. And even when I started this school, I was still not planning on becoming a software developer. I thought it was hard, I thought it was not for me. And my plan at the time was to become really good at digital marketing and be working on applications and websites and web applications in general, and maybe become a project manager or even an entrepreneur. But my plan was never to be a software developer. However, what happened one day when I was in my second year of school, or actually it was the third year of school. What happened is that we were doing a finals project, so a project that was very important that we had to present in front of other teachers, and it was about building a website for football team and doing all their marketing strategy. But what ended up happening is, so I was in charge of doing the marketing aspect, so the SEO, the social media, and all that stuff. But what ended up happening is I did my job, my part. I did the marketing part. But then we had one programmer in our team, and what happened is that he actually dropped out of the school. So he left the school pretty much at the end of the year, and we were in the middle of this project. So we had no developer in our team, and so yeah, we needed someone to build our website. We had no one to build our website. So I like tried like doing a few small coding projects at the time. So I had like very little experience, but I was like, okay, why not give it a shot? So I told my team, okay, I'm gonna try to do it. And what I did is like I went home and I started coding pretty late at night, and I was coding all night. And I did that for 2 weeks, and after the 2 weeks, we had our website like ready, and yeah, it was really a great experience. And during these 2 weeks, I learned like a lot, and I really became confident in the fact that I liked coding and that I could be a developer. But before that, I didn't really know that I could. So that was a WordPress project, and WordPress is like built on PHP, and then there was some HTML and CSS. And yeah, that was, so we built this custom website on WordPress. So it was like a lot of custom code, and yeah, I enjoyed it, but so yeah, I enjoyed it, but I was not still sure if I was gonna be a programmer. And so I started asking the question like, what I'm gonna do now with this new experience. And what I did is basically started looking for other programming languages just because I was curious about what I could do, what were the other programming languages besides PHP. And well, what ended up happening is I stumbled upon Ruby, and Ruby felt like very, very different because it felt like the syntax was very, very simple and clear and like cleaner. And although I was starting to understand PHP and I was starting having like good experience with PHP, when I found out about Ruby and I started trying it, it looked like really cool, and I was really motivated to learn this language because it felt like it was easier to understand, and also at the time it started becoming really popular because it was used by like a lot of startups back in the day, and even now, but even more like back in the day, a lot of startups used it. So like LinkedIn, Shopify, Airbnb, and a lot of others on GitHub, and so it was very popular. So I really saw no reason not to try it, and so I started learning Ruby and Ruby on Rails, and yeah, I did my first internship, and I had my first job, and I became a Ruby on Rails developer. But yeah, so that was a long intro, but the point was that I chose Ruby 10 years ago because I had a first experience with PHP, and when I compared with Ruby, when I discovered Ruby, it looked like 10 times better, and honestly, it was like the experience was really fun compared to WordPress and PHP, and also I felt like I could do more things. I just had more tools and more capabilities, and yeah, I also learned Ruby on Rails, so it looked like I was gonna have a lot of opportunities when I learned Ruby on Rails back then. And yeah, so one of the first main reasons, as I said, was the simplicity and readability. So Ruby is like really a natural language, or as it has been conceived as a language that is as close as possible to a natural language. And what this means is that when you write Ruby, you feel like you're almost writing plain English, and that's great because it also implies that you have to write less code, and that's what we mean by less boilerplate. Boilerplate means like writing repetitive code over and over again, like not the same, pretty much the same code over and over again, or writing complex code for something that could be simple. And here you have an example that compares how you will just print out a string of characters in Java on the left and in Ruby on the right, and you can already see that there is a lot of abstraction on the right. So the method is very easy to call. It's only puts, and that's it. And also you don't have to use parentheses. You can use a space, and it will do the same thing. And you don't have to finish your lines with a semicolon, which was pretty annoying, I remember at the time. But yeah, so that's a great example. There are many more. And for example, for defining a class, so right now you don't have to know exactly what a class is, but let's say that it's a concept that allows you to have a certain sets of characteristics in your app. So for example, if you want a part of your app to be behaving a certain way and give it features. So in this example, we used the example of a dog, but it could be a car, it could be a user, and yeah. So basically, in Ruby, it's very easy. You just say that you're gonna define a class, you give it a name, and def means defining, and that's for defining a method, and yeah, so you just define a method for the dog class, and you call it bark, and you say what it does, and so it just returns a string, in this case woof. So if you call the bark method on the dog class, then it's just gonna return woof, and you don't have to know all these concepts, but when I explain it, I feel like at least you get an idea. You don't get lost in the code. What I explain in English makes sense in the Ruby part. So that's the point of readability and simplicity. And so to have like even more examples, so interactive and fun environment, that's something I really like about Ruby that I didn't have in PHP, but let me give you a small example. So if I go here and I launch a terminal window and I go in the Ruby console, so you write IRB, and so here I can start playing around with the Ruby language, and so for example, I'm gonna create a test string, so that's a variable, and inside of it I'm gonna just save a string basically. And so you have like methods that can allow you to manipulate the string, and for example here, if I just say length, I know that there are 11 characters in that string, and so that's counting the space, and I can do something like reverse, and that will return the reverse string. And yeah, so here it's really fun because you can start learning the methods by reading the documentation and trying them here before writing them in the code. That's something that I do pretty often, or at least I used to do a lot, is when I write my code inside my Ruby on Rails application. If I'm not sure about how a method works, then I'll test it here in the console pretty easily. Sorry. And then yeah, when I know exactly how the method works and I have the result I want, then I use it in my real code, my controller or my model or things like that. And yeah, what else can we check here? We can do math operations pretty easily, and here we can retrieve score. I think we can have like a score string, and that would be something like test string plus 0 plus plus space plus score. And well, that's great because here we already, that's exactly the case I was telling you, because you can test things out here and you don't have to wait for them to break in the app. And this is really a great playground to get your basics right. And so here the issue is that, yeah, I was gonna add this, but I wanted to make sure that it was working like this. So basically score is a number and not a string. And here you can see actually the difference. When it returns a number, it has a different color, and when it returns a string, it's red. So and here we cannot really mix these two types because Ruby will not know which one you want. Here we have a string, here we have a string, and here we have an integer. So what we can do is just convert our score, which is 4, to a string, and there you go. Then it can mix it up in one string. And just so you can see, if I do score to S here, then it's going to return a string, so it's going to be red. And if I only do score, then it's going to return the integer, which is in this different color. So there's this obviously very important concept of types of objects you're working with in Ruby, but it's pretty simple. You mainly use strings and integers and some other types as well, but maybe this is not the video for that. And so yeah, I've had some fun in the Ruby console. I can just leave, and we'll have I'll try to do more in-depth video about the Ruby console and Ruby basics. I think it can be pretty interesting. Yeah, and so the next point I want to talk about is the strong community support. And this is something that really helped me as soon as I started like using Ruby. So there is a lot of things that we call gems in Ruby, and those are basically libraries that's been built by other people, other developers, and it's very easy to install them and use them in your own code. And this is one of the biggest assets of Ruby and Ruby on Rails is to be able to use these gems and install them like literally in one line. There is a great support from big names in the industry. So as I was saying before, there are a lot of big startups that use Ruby on Rails and that are still using Ruby on Rails. And from that, they actually grow big teams of Ruby and Ruby on Rails developers. And those teams, as they are using these technologies, they create libraries and they create structures and best practices. And those best practices, these libraries, are usually shared very openly. That's a concept of open source. And sorry for the ambulance noise. But yeah, so these big names in the industry really like to give back, and they create a lot of useful resources for smaller startups or new Ruby on Rails developers. And also one big point I'm not mentioning here, but it's usually pretty interesting and innovative and fun startups and companies that use Ruby on Rails. So it's usually a very good environment to work, and yeah, that's really definitely a benefit of working with Ruby and Ruby on Rails, I feel like, compared to other languages. And yeah, you have conferences and meetups pretty often, pretty regularly. and those are big conferences. And even now, like I think this last few years, it obviously was like less of a thing, but now I feel like it's really coming back. Conferences in general, but also conferences about Ruby and Ruby on Rails. It feels like it's the language and the framework are coming back a bit stronger. And also you can usually find like in medium size or big cities, you can find meetups about Ruby pretty easily. um, I think people in this community like really like to share their passion for this language and what they're building with it. Um, yeah, and how they are using it in cool and creative ways. Because really Ruby has like the language itself has been created with this idea of developer happiness in mind, which is not very common when someone creates a programming language, because most of the time it's about performance or like solving an issue that's happening in other languages, or simply um, you know the language is created how its creator wants to use it. But yeah, Ruby has been created with this idea in mind, and that's also I think what makes it popular, and like why people like to share around it. And yeah, Ruby like has like very different use cases. It can be pretty much used for anything in programming. I'm not even listing all the use cases here, but for sure, large-scale web applications like GitHub, Shopify, Airbnb have been using it since the beginning and still use it. And there's sometimes this misconception. It's not entirely a misconception, but that Ruby is not a performant language. But the thing is, it's not entirely true, because this mostly happens when your application is not optimized, and but usually when like a successful startup uses Ruby and Ruby on Rails, they really have best practices and they do their like everything to make the code quality better, and that improves performance a lot. The way you design your software and the way you optimize it. And also, I mean, those performance topics and issues really happen in very specific cases. For example, when you have like an application with like very, very high amount of users, and those users use like an application in real time, for example, a chat or something like that, then in these cases, yeah, it absolutely makes sense to rewrite this part of your application in another language. But again, those are very specific cases, and they don't happen as often, and also they really almost never happen until you have a lot of users. And so the point is that when you arrive there, then like rewriting these parts of the applications is not a problem, and you've taken advantage of the benefits of Ruby until you arrive there. So you arrive there faster because you use Ruby and Ruby on Rails. Sorry. And also, as I said, because Ruby um, is placing like developer programmer happiness at the center of its philosophy, then it also makes it enjoyable to build applications and greater applications. And really, like one thing that Ruby and Ruby on Rails shines at is creating smaller scale applications, and I think it's been exactly created for that. And it's really, really an amazing tool for entrepreneurs, but even for freelancers. So for example, if you have the choice of choosing the technology you're going to work with for your clients as a freelancer or as an agency, I think it's really a great choice, because the more you create applications and the less time it takes you, because this is how Ruby on Rails has been built. It's like, there's a lot of pre-built blocks in it, but also the more you use them and the easier it gets for you. And it's fun because you can really focus on building the things that are very specific to the application, and the business logic, and connecting to APIs and all that. And if you have personal projects, again, I think it's really great because you can go pretty fast and have like a good, enjoyable experience. You have a lot of documentation, libraries, and gems to use. So yeah, really, really great for that use case. I used it a lot in my freelance projects and in my career in general to create backend APIs for mobile applications. So you create mobile applications with um, Java or like Objective-C or like Swift or React Native. That's what I use the most. And you can create APIs, and so have your backend and your database using Ruby on Rails, and you can connect both pretty easily. So yeah, if you're able to write Ruby, you can write web applications, but you can also create, well, the big part of a mobile application as well. And yeah, you can use it for any small script that you're gonna use on your terminal, on your computer, whether it's something to rename files or just a small program that does something specific for you, like just a scrapping program if you want to go and regularly pull some informations from some website. Yeah, and lastly, music as well. That's something that I was really um, that I was really surprised by, and that I really enjoyed when I stumbled upon it. So it's called Sonic Pi, and it's a software that allows you to create music with Ruby, and it's really amazing. I highly recommend you to check it if you're into music, and I think it's really really cool. Yeah, you can also find like live, like pretty long like live sets of the creator of Sonic Pi that is playing with the software. So basically, you can do so much with Ruby, and the main reason why I think like a lot of people use it for those all these different use cases is because it's fun to use and it's simple to use. So yeah, people want to use it for pretty much everything. And so one thing that is really great with Ruby is that I mean, especially with Ruby on Rails, is that you have to focus on less things. There's already a focus on best practices that are inherent in the language or when you use Ruby on Rails, and so you can make sure you're pretty sure that you're gonna follow the best practices because the big players and the big the very experienced programmers that came before and that built the language or built the Ruby on Rails framework, they have a lot of experience and they already embedded all that experience in the language itself and in the framework itself. So you just have to follow the convention, and you don't have to really care about configuring things, which takes a lot of time when you're using another language or framework that's not really been configured in a certain way. And there's a big emphasis on testing and quality. So there's this very important concept in programming that's called test-driven development, and sometimes you'll only hear about testing. And basically, that's one brick of software quality. That's something that's very important, especially when you start programming and developing bigger apps. And yeah, you don't have to actually learn the skill when you're a beginner, but it's something you have to keep in mind. And it's actually, I think, like really my number one secret, I would say, to becoming a very skilled and highly paid developer fast. But basically, it's a concept that allows you to write a code that actually verifies your code and make sure that you've built your application properly. So in this example, it's you don't have to really understand this in depth, but in this example, we're testing the reverse method, that is a reverse that you can use on strings, and we're just testing that when we use that reverse method that I actually used in the console before, it returns exactly what we want, which is hello in reverse. So this is a very simple example, and it doesn't necessarily exactly portray like the real usefulness of testing, but you can get a good idea from here that you have a way of testing methods and make sure that they return the proper stuff. And especially when you're going to write your own methods, then you can make sure that you have you test them in different cases and make sure that your method covers different cases of use. And this is really a great way, and maybe and yeah, the number one way for you to make sure you write quality code that is future-proof and yeah, that is solid. And the great thing about Ruby, as you can see here, sorry, is that it's very easy to read a test case here. We know that we're describing the string method, so we're gonna test something in relation to how the string class works, and we know, and the use case is very easy to read. It should reverse the string, so. And we are saying that we're expecting the reverse method called on the hello string to return a certain result. And again, I think you can read it pretty easily, and that's like very close to English. In fact, it uses a lot of English words actually. And so finally, the last point I wanted to touch on was that what I really like about Ruby is that it removes everything that could be a bit complicated or super fluous, I guess is the word, about a language. Like, so for example, if a syntax is a bit too strong or a bit too complex, Ruby doesn't really have these issues, and so you can really focus on the foundations, of programming and object-oriented programming, And yeah, Ruby really allows you to focus on that without having to focus too much on the language. And so I think it allows you to learn faster and with less, resistance or frustration. And then when you're really confident in those skills, then you can use them in any other language because they're exactly the same. And yeah, I had a small example here. I think I used a similar example before, but in this example, basically what I want to show you is that there is this concept of object-oriented programming that's called inheritance. And again, we don't have to go into too much details, but inheritance is having one class and having a second class that is similar to it, that takes its properties and behaves like it. But the thing is, you take the second class and you can customize how it behaves, so you can have a slightly different behavior. And so in this example, we're defining a class animal, and it has a method which is speak. But for now, the method is generic. And then when we create the cat class, we know that it's also an animal, so we're going to inherit all its properties, but we can be more specific about the speak method of this class. And in this case, we have something specific to the cat, right? And yeah, this example is a good example because really all the inheritance behavior is very simple to understand in that arrow, and basically it means, yeah, that cat inherit from the animal class that is defined above, or typically that would be defined in another file. But yeah, and here you can see it's very easy to inherit, and the syntax is very useful because yeah, it's easy to understand, and it's gonna allow you to learn those concepts faster. And then when you're gonna encounter them in other languages, you already understand them. So if the syntax changes a bit, it's fine. You already understand the concept. So yeah, that's pretty much it about why to learn Ruby as a programming language for beginners. I went I went over several points. I think those are the main ones. And yeah, I really think it's the best language out there to learn programming. Although maybe that's not what you're gonna hear, because right now Python is super popular because a lot of machine learning is built Python. JavaScript is also very popular. It's been popular a lot this last few years because it allows to use frameworks and libraries for the front end, all in JavaScript, but also do backend. But again, I don't think that learning those languages give you the best possible foundations because it makes it harder. It's definitely harder to learn JavaScript or to learn backend using JavaScript, in my opinion, because there are way more guidelines when you use Ruby and Ruby on Rails. So it gives you stronger, more solid foundations. And when you master these foundations in Ruby and you really enjoy like learning and coding in Ruby, then you can transition to other languages way easier. And that's exactly what I did in my career. I was a Ruby programmer for about 3 years before I started learning JavaScript, and then it allowed me to learn like React and React Native. But I always kept Ruby as a backend programming language, and this is where I got all my foundations from. So anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. It's been a bit long, but I think I covered this topic completely. I mean, not necessarily completely. I could go in depth with more examples, but you have an overview. If you're on the fence about learning Ruby, I think this video could have helped you for that. So let me know if it was helpful, or if you want me to cover other topics. I will be happy to do so. Until then, take care and see you. Bye.